The PNC Week in Review is brought to you by Taco Bell.
Hafa-day, Guam and Saipan viewers. I'm Byron and welcome to PNC's Week in Review. Guam was spared again as Tropical Storm Halong caused only minor damage to the island, most of it due to flooding. Clint Richell has more.
The good news is, the winds were not at typhoon strength, but they were at high tropical storm strength. And we had roughly a foot of water that hit us in 24 hours. That's a lot of rain. And there was flooding in many areas, but if you take a look in the condition of the Guam infrastructure during the during the storm, as well as the aftermath in terms of recovery, I believe that we did a pretty darn good job.
There were some pockets of power outages in various parts of the island. Parts of Talafofo and Narahan were without power. Jotnia Mayor Ken Joada says that parts of his village were without power for nearly 2 days. In the Menengan area, power went out on Tuesday night, well before the storm's closest point of approach, and wasn't restored until late yesterday. Windward Hills was without power since about 8 a.m. on Wednesday. Palantat was without power from about 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Wednesday. But by today, all of those areas had power restored. Mayor Ada says there was also a small landslide in Menengan that blocked the road for a while.
The landslide in Menengan, basically, due to the heavy rains, we have a high wall, which actually has no retaining wall along a public easement. What happened was it basically fell covering the road. We were able to remove about half of it to make it passable.
Ada says the rest of the rubble will be removed once the weather conditions improve. DPW Director Carl Dominguez says his crews were making the rounds yesterday before Core 1 was declared.
There were some downed trees, but fortunately, I did not receive a report that a major routed road was completely blocked. So I actually inspected the southern roads with Ambrose Constantino of Homeland Security, and we saw 3 or 4 downed trees, but fortunately the trees blocked maybe one of several lanes or one of 2 lanes, so the roads were passable. Down in Moleso, however, there was a couple of spots where there is serious flooding, always floods in these areas during storms and heavy rain events.
Some of the major flooding was down in the village of Tuman.
That is one of the hot bond projects that is on the list, and I think it's actually the second largest ticket item in terms of proposed budget. After the museum, which is roughly around $27 million, there is a large project that would handle the 2-month flooding, especially over by the Fujita pump station area where that ponding basin is.
Pangilinan says it'll take a few years before these flood mitigation projects are designed, constructed, and completed. Some village roads had bad flooding, for example in Hagatnya on West O'Brien Drive behind the district court.
It's just a bad situation. It's just a level road, and the storm drainage system there is just not adequate. And and all that water just gathers there and has nowhere to go.
Dominguez says the drainage system needs to be rebuilt, but there is currently no funding for this, and federal funds only apply to Guam's primary or routed roads and not the island's village streets.
There was a study done by our consultants back in 2010, and it's the village flooding mitigation study. And in 2010, the consultants estimated the cost to be in the neighborhood of $170 million.
However, the main or primary roads were pretty clear. Even Polaris Point and Pago Bay were passable. Pago Bay used to be completely flooded during heavy rains, but DPW crews have kept the drainage area in Pago Bay clear.
Dominguez says some traffic lights were flashing due to humidity in the control panels. Others were out because of power outages. Like Guam, our neighbor island to the north, Rota, is also cleaning up following the passage of Tropical Storm Halong yesterday. PNC's Saipan correspondent Mark Rabago reports on how the island's 2,500 residents got through the storm without much damage or injury.
Aside from some toppled trees and 16 people seeking shelter at Rota's Aging Center, the CNMI was left relatively unscathed when Tropical Storm Halong passed closest to the islands yesterday. There were no reports of injuries or major damage on the Commonwealth's southernmost island, while on Saipan and Tinian, Halong was hardly felt. As Saipan Tribune reports, it was mostly sunny all day, with only scattered rain showers. The U.S. National Weather Service in Guam said as of 8 p.m. last night, the typhoon warning was cancelled for Rota, and tropical storm warning was also cancelled for Guam as Halong moved away from the Marianas. Earlier in the day, Governor Eloy Enos ordered the closure of all non-essential government operations in the CNMI due to the anticipated threat of the storm. Mark Rabago, PNC News, Saipan.
There were 4 Filipinos and 2 Indonesians aboard the Take Maru 55. They swam ashore to Cocos Island and found shelter in one of the Cocos Resort buildings. Guam Fire and Rescue sent out a boat to pick them up on Thursday morning and brought them to Maritzo. None of them were reported injured. Coast Guard Lieutenant William White says they were not able to reach the scene until Tuesday when the weather conditions improved.
This morning we were working on conducting an assessment of the vessel, but right now the current weather conditions preclude us from getting to the boat by water because of the high surf conditions, and the low ceiling is preventing one of the helicopters from HSC-25 from currently launching to give us an aerial view of what the boat looks like right now.
The Guam Police Department interviewed the crew members to find out what happened, and the Coast Guard are working with the EPA to mitigate environmental damage and determine whether the vessel can be salvaged. Finally, Port Guam established a 400-yard exclusion zone around the grounded vessels. Mariners and recreational boaters are advised to exercise caution around the vicinity of the vessel in case of breakaway debris. In another story, the controversy continues to boil at the Archdiocese of Agana as dozens of supporters gathered in prayer on the latest crisis to hit the Catholic Church. The termination of Monsignor James Benavente as rector. Monsignor James' removal comes just days after Father John Watson was removed for a sex scandal dating back to the 1970s. But the Archdiocese denies any claim that the two events were related. Janela Carrera has more.
Little is known about why Monsignor James Benavente was fired from the church as a rector of the Cathedral de Basilica. Neither the Archdiocese nor Monsignor James have revealed the reasons. The news became public when Monsignor James informed his fellow brothers and sisters of his removal. Tim Rohr is a close Catholic observer who maintains a blog about the Catholic community on Guam. He tells PNC what he's learned of Monsignor James's removal.
He's accusing not just Monsignor James, but Monsignor James, Richard Untalan, Joe Rivera, and Sister Stephen Torres, who were the 4 members of the Archdiocesan Finance Council that the Archbishop terminated after they refused to permit the conveyance of the title of the old Axion hotel property to a separate corporation away from the Archdiocese. And so the Archbishop is accusing Monsignor James and those other 3 of trying to sell that property without the Archbishop's permission.
However, this afternoon, Archbishop Anthony Abron released a statement on the finances of the Archdiocese of Agana. There is no mention of Monsignor James's removal. However, it states, in part, I have decided that a change in administration in these 2 entities, the Agana Cathedral Basilica and the Catholic Cemeteries of Guam, is necessary and urgent to reestablish proper accounting practices and to complete the financial review, financial report, and the audit. Archbishop Aberon says the accounting firm Deloitte & Touche conducted a review on the church's finances and found inappropriate accounting practices. Meanwhile, Rohr says that Monsignor James has still not been provided with a list of charges against him explaining why he was fired.
I think anybody watching this can relate with when you're accused, you at least deserve to know what you're accused of. And Archbishop Aperon won't even do that, won't even give Monsignor James a lift of the charges. The question is why? I believe it's because all those charges are false.
In fact, Rohr believes Monsignor James was just collateral damage for the removal of Father John Howard Watson last week. Father Watson was fired after an old sex scandal surfaced dating back to the 1970s when he was serving in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. It was Rohr who brought Watson's tainted past to light on on his blog about 2 weeks ago.
The attack on Monsignor James is in complete retaliation for the national embarrassment that Archbishop Apron brought upon himself. Because as the AP story showed, Archbishop Apron was advised by the lawyers of the Los Angeles Archdiocese in 2011 about Father Watson. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. The fact is that the Archbishop did not address it, and knew since 2011.
As the controversy continues, a prayer service was held in front of the Agana Cathedral this afternoon. Family spokesperson for Monsignor James, Gabby Bamba, told PNC yesterday that the prayer was organized to pray for the entire church. Before the prayer service began, some protest signs were displayed on the roadside by the church. PNC attempted to contact the owner of the truck with this sign. However, no one seemed to know who it belonged to.
Father Adrian Cristobal noted that the Archdiocese has been reviewing its finances for some time now. Coming up after the break, we look at the conclusion to the Bank of Guam robbery trial.
Not looking. Just want to know if your friend is staying for dinner. Use this and hurry up. Your smothered burrito's getting cold. Gabriel, you forgot your satchel. Don't work late. It's Uncle Teddy's birthday tonight. Oh, she's cute. How was your day? Did you ask Mr. Scudolero for that promotion? Dinner's on the table, smothered burritos.
Sometimes it's good to get smothered. Smothered in savory enchilada sauce and tasty melted cheese, Taco Bell's new smothered burrito is smothered in everything you love.
Get the story from the Pacific News Center. Get both sides. Get it right. Get it from reporters you can trust. Clint Rogel, Janella Carrera, Betsy Brown, Roselle Romanes, and Kevin Kerrigan. We've got the story. You can get it too. The Pacific News Center. News you can trust.
Welcome back to PNC's Week in Review. In the airlines industry, mechanical issues forced Cape Air to suspend flights between Guam and Saipan, and they did not resume normal operations until yesterday afternoon. During that period, United Airlines announced they would try and help its subsidiaries provide extra flights between the islands. PNC Saipan correspondent Mark Rabago reports.
Suspected mechanical issues canceled several flights of Cape Air over the weekend, infuriating further local passengers already upset about the service of local flights operated by United Airlines. Saipan Tribune reports that 2 morning flights and an evening flight destined for Guam yesterday were canceled, as well as a flight destined for Rota in the afternoon. The flight cancellations come ahead of other reported cancellations this weekend. Cape Air flies between Saipan, Guam, and Rota using ATR-42 aircraft. The last time Cape Air United Airlines suspended flights to Saipan for a certain duration was from March 21 to March 29, also due to technical issues. United provided an extra flight to affected customers using a Boeing 737-800 aircraft. Mark Rabago, PNC News, Saipan.
In Superior Court, many surprising twists and turns in the Bank of Guam robbery trial, but none as unusual as Monday's sentencing. Not only did Jathan Tao admit he did it, he says he wanted to take fall for everyone else involved. Sure enough, Judge James Canto did not hesitate to impose the maximum sentence on the bank robber. Janelle Carrera has the story.
That'll be the sentence of the court. A total of 21 years in prison.
Less than 6 months later, and the case is finally closed on the Jigo Bank of Guam robbery, but not without its twists and turns. A total of 4 people were charged in the February 6 robbery: Jathan Tao, Ricky McIntosh, Vincent David Santos, and Antonio Quirigua. Midway through the case, Tao accepted a plea deal for a lesser sentence, but that required him to testify against his co-defendants. However, during trial, Tao reneged on his agreement and refused to testify. His lack of cooperation cost the prosecution their case, as Judge James Canto acquitted McIntosh, Santos, and Quirigua from the bench. But because Tao had already pleaded guilty, there was no way he could back out while everyone else got away. But that didn't seem to concern Tao. In fact, quite the opposite. In a bold and brazen move, he told Judge Canto he wanted to take the fall for everyone else.
I want my co-defendants to get sentenced. If I'm gonna get sentenced, it's really like, I don't know, I did it, so why they gonna Yeah, I understand we have conspiracy, that's about it, but if I'm gonna get sentenced, I'm willing to get sentenced. But my co-defendants,
Right.
I don't think it's fair they're gonna get sentenced too. Because you guys already sentenced me, so it's like, I'm the guy who did it. So, just me. You know what I mean?
Right.
Tautao's statement seemed to catch everyone by surprise. Even Judge Canto had to clarify exactly what Tautau was asking for.
I think he's saying he was willing to take the fall for all of them, is what he's saying.
Yes.
I heard the opposite. I thought he was reiterating your earlier request to say, it's not fair if I should get sentenced and my co-defendants get off with nothing.
No, he's saying he's willing to take the fall.
In your history of working as a prosecutor, have you ever heard of any defendant willing to take the fall, the blame for all the other co-defendants?
No.
Assistant Attorney General Basil O'Malley asked Judge Canto to impose a maximum sentence, noting that Tautau lacked remorse. But speaking on behalf of his client, defense attorney Gerald Gray pointed out that the fact that Tautau accepts responsibility for everyone else does show remorse.
Someone getting up and saying, let me take the fall, instead of blaming everyone else, I think that in a sense is remorse.
And the approach he was given and the statements he was making today, I believe, were just show the complete disregard for respect for the system.
Judge James Canto sentenced Tautau to 10 years for the Bank of Guam robbery, 10 years for the Jigo home burglary, and 1 year for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, with the sentences to run consecutively, giving him a total of 21 years in prison.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So what about my co-defendants?
You let them off.
Thank you, sir.
During sentencing, Judge Canto said Tautau, at 18 years old, had the distinction of being the first convicted bank robber on Guam. In the ongoing Seleznev court case on Thursday, Chief District Court Judge Francis Taidenko Gatewood denied the release of Russian citizen Roman Seleznev back to the Russian authorities. Seleznev was facing charges of cyber theft in Washington state dating back to 2011. He was picked up in the Maldives earlier last month and then sent to Guam. The details surrounding his arrest were the point of contention on Thursday's hearing as attorneys argued over the lawfulness of his captivity. Janela Carrera has more.
In what some might deem an affront to the Russian government, Chief District Court Judge Francis Taidenko Gatewood denied the release of accused Russian cyber hacker Roman Seleznev. The son of a Russian lawmaker, Seleznev will now have to face charges in Washington state, where he was originally indicted in 2011. Seleznev's defense counsel, attorney Pat Seville, reacts to the decision.
Well, of course it's disappointing, but she did preserve the issue for later if it turns out that Mr. Seleznev goes back to Washington.
Judge Gatewood noted in her decision that Seleznev will still have the opportunity to present the same arguments over the legality of his arrest in Washington state.
So I think it's an issue that will continue to come up in this case.
But given that the judge here in Guam denied that motion, do you think that that would set the precedent when he goes to Washington and argues the same?
Well, we hope that the judge in Washington will have a more complete evidentiary record than we were able to present here.
That was the focal point of Seleznev's argument. Not only does Seleznev contend that his capture goes against international law, a full report still has not been provided to the defense team.
There's a lot of evidence out there that we haven't seen yet.
Judge Gatewood mostly based her decision on other federal case laws in which courts have upheld the forcible abductions of alleged criminals on foreign soil. In fact, in those case laws, the circumstances of the abduction were much worse. Yet other federal courts ruled that they were not shocking and outrageous enough as to release them from U.S. custody. However, Seville argued otherwise. He pointed out that abduction does not need to involve torture for it to be deemed as shocking and outrageous. He went on to accuse the U.S. government of duplicity, deception, and corruption of another country's judicial process. That's what shocks the conscience, Your Honor, he said. It appeared the U.S. government initially went through the right process, seeking an arrest warrant from a judge in the Maldives. When the Maldivian judge denied that for lack of evidence, Seville says the U.S. government then struck a deal with cops in the Maldives and just grabbed him. The U.S. doesn't have the right to circumvent the Maldivian judicial system, Seville told Judge Gatewood. Seattle-based Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Morgan countered that there is a logical disconnect in Seville's argument. Morgan pointed out that in other case laws, the U.S. literally kidnaps someone by force and by gunpoint, and still the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that was not outrageous conduct. Yet here, Seleznyov is asking the court to rule his capture was more outrageous. That cannot be right, Morgan argued through teleconference. Seville then pressured Judge Gatewood to consider the global climate and current world affairs between the U.S. and Russia. We are on the brink of some very serious matters, Seville told Judge Gatewood, referring to U.S. sanctions against Russia over the controversial attack on Malaysia Flight 17. We're saying, Russia, you have to obey the rule of law, he noted. Yet in this small corner of the world, the U.S. is not abiding by the very laws it preaches to be sacred. He also argued that the charges against his client don't involve terrorism, violence, or murder. It's a mundane sort of case, he pointed out, which makes the U.S. government's behavior in abducting Seleznyov all the more egregious.
A hearing on Seleznyov's identity was held later that day. In another story, Guam police say that 62-year-old Nick Tolentino was stabbed to death, and they are now conducting a homicide investigation. Tolentino's body was found last Sunday morning by his daughter inside his locked hair salon in Tamuning. PNC's Kevin Kerrigan reports.
The wailing of family members as the body was taken away yesterday afternoon. Neighboring business owners said it was Nick Tolentino, his bloodied body found sprawled on the floor of his hair salon yesterday morning on the second floor of this two-story building behind the burnt-out Hafaday Exchange in Tamuning.
Do you have any knowledge of what might have happened?
Nothing at all. I have no clue, but normally bodies don't bleed out on their own.
Billy Ray is the owner of the nearby Mai Tai restaurant. Yesterday morning about 10:30, he and his wife heard a woman screaming. His wife went out to find out what had happened. She saw Nick's daughter crying outside the locked door of the salon. Through the window inside, they could see Nick on the floor.
When she got to there, plus the lady was still hysterical. She looked in the window, actually saw Nick Tolentino's feet.
On the floor?
On the floor.
Ray said there appeared to have been a disturbance of some kind.
She actually saw a broom laying across the top of him, and the not a bookshelf, he actually had a product shelf that was pushed over the opposite way.
Did she go inside?
No, the door was actually locked, but you can the windows are shaded, but you can actually see inside.
Others who also knew Tolentino described him as funny. May Lumbang works in a restaurant below the hair salon. She says Tolentino would often come in for lunch and crack jokes with her and others.
He's a friendly guy. He comes here, makes us laugh.
Really?
Yes.
Tells jokes?
Yes, he's very friendly.
Did he have any enemies or that you're aware of?
None. He's very nice guy, very personable, always part of the community here with all the owners, and always comes and talks to us and says hi.
Medical examiner Dr. Aurelio Espinola completed an autopsy this afternoon on Tolentino. He told PNC News it was definitely a homicide. An acting GPD spokesman officer, Paul Tapau, later announced that the 62-year-old Tolentino had been stabbed to death, and a homicide investigation is now underway. GPD is asking anyone with information about his murder to call police or call Guam Crime Stoppers at 477-HELP. Kevin Kerrigan, PNC News.
Stay tuned and we will take a look back at the cattle shipments to Guam.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that. You gotta like that.
What's not to like? Like. I like that.
Ooh, I like.
Oh, I definitely like that.
That too. I like that one.
I like it. Like, that's weird.
I like this. Yeah.
There's a whole lot of liking going on. That's right, we're too cool not to like. Like us on Facebook today. What do you like?
I like it.
I liked that yesterday.
Burn up the bandwidth. Guam's hottest talk comes to your smartphone with News Talk K57's streaming apps. The latest in news, weather, and talk in the palm of your hand. Plus, exclusive features let you talk back to us via email. Visit our webpage and see breaking news on PNC's Twitter page. Smartphone users can now download the free app, which will stream all day, every day, and anywhere. Look in your platform's app store for K57 and download it today.
Help make a difference in our community and join the fight against crime. Tune in to PNC News every Wednesday night at 6 on ABC 7 and on Fox 6 at 7 p.m. for the Guam Crime Stoppers Crime of the Week. Each week, the Guam Police Department will highlight an unsolved crime, hoping you may have information relating to the case. Join Crime Stoppers Coordinator Officer Paul Tapao every Wednesday night on PNC News for the Guam Crime Stoppers Crime of the Week.
Welcome back to PNC's Week in Review. In a new development, Guam received its first in what is expected to be a series of shipments of cattle from Saipan on Monday. Saipan has been unable to ship cattle to Guam because of some unnecessarily restrictive laws that were recently revised through a bill introduced by Speaker Judy Won-Pat. PNC's Clint Rogel has more.
Saipan cattle rancher Ernie Torres confirms that 10 head of cattle from Saipan arrived on Guam this morning.
9 of them will be bulls, male, and this one female, young heifer. And then we're looking at shipping 2 more containers immediately after that. The second shipment will be adult female, and the third shipment would be probably calves right around the 12 to 18 month age group, and we'll be shipping them in a modified 20-foot shipping container.
All 3 shipments combined will bring a total of 30 to 40 head of new cattle to Guam. And this new influx of cattle is sorely needed because Guam's cattle has been inbreeding for years, and new genes are needed to create more diversity in its gene pool. In the 80s and 90s, the Saipan government brought in some Santa
Torres, who actually grew up on Guam before moving to Saipan, says that Guam was supposed to build a multi-million-dollar slaughterhouse years ago, but for some reason the deal fell through. He says Saipan has a slaughterhouse that only costs somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000 to build. That's it for your weekend review. Tune in tomorrow night for your news now on ABC7. For all the latest updates, visit our website, pacificnewscenter.com. I'm Byron Zun. Thanks for watching.